they occupy land with the hope of getting it permanently, but sometimes they're evicted, they go back again and again. When the government finally decides that that piece of land is in fact unproductive or illegally obtained, then they might agree legally that should become a settlement for those families and perhaps other families as well. So then it becomes a legal settlement, and then that means they have access to public funds, to government funds for the school, for building their houses and so on. There's a whole variety of funds that they can have access to. So the first stage is occupation, which is always a very temporary situation, although in fact some occupations last for years. And the second stage is when they get the permanent right to that land. And then it's up to the group there to decide how they're going to organise, whether they're going to have a cooperative with everyone in it, whether they're going to have a producers cooperative, whether they're going to have individual lots and share certain things. I mean, it sort of varies from settlement to settlement, doesn't it? The bottom line is the concentration of land in Brazil. That's what you have to remember, that perhaps 1% of landowners, and this is a situation which still exists today, 1% of the landowners own up to 50% of the land. And on the other hand, there are millions and millions of poor families, peasant families, squatter farmers, smallholders, sharecroppers, who add up to 14 million people at least, who either have very little land, so it's not enough to survive on, or have no land at all and who want land. So when the idea of occupying land is that you're occupying land that belongs perhaps to a big landowner, he's not using it, or he's using it for just half a dozen cattle. It's what they call unproductive land. And the MST actually choose very carefully the areas they are going to occupy. They go to the registry office, they look up the land titles, they see whether in fact this landowner legally occupies the land, because very often it's been illegally occupied by the landowner, or they choose land which is very unproductive. So they target areas of land where they think they have a very good chance of winning it when it actually comes to being decided by the National Land Reform Agency, INCRA. And then, as you say, they organise the families very carefully. They prepare them for what's to come. And they obviously try to choose people who haven't got land or need land, but they choose people who realise this thing that they're going to be evicted perhaps time and time again. It's a long struggle. It's not an easy thing at all. And I mean, I remember some of the families that I've talked to in occupations, they were people who were desperate. Nobody else had ever given them a chance. The MST gave them a chance that they'd never had in Brazil, because it gave them a chance not only the idea of having a bit of land where you planted stuff, you raised your family, you fed your family, but an education as well. And that was incredibly important, because the MST do in fact attach so much importance to education. So it gave them hope. That's what I remember so much about some of the families I talked to. It was giving them hope where before they didn't have any hope of improving their lot.
And in a way, the occupation itself is part of the education, because particularly in the northeast of Brazil, so many of these families have worked for centuries on these sugar estates, have been completely disempowered, powerless. And the whole process of actually taking part in an occupation, organising yourselves, empowers the people. So often, the MST wants this process of occupation. It wants to have these camps. It wants to have a period of at least months where they can actually organise the people and help the people, empower the people, help the people take control of their own destinies. And it really is quite impressive when you go back to some of these camps after a few months, how much the people have changed. It is a real empowering process, and this is very important in actually creating the kind of people who afterwards can run land settlements, can actually take control of agricultural production themselves.